Don't say Guinea-Bissau are going to win. Or Uganda. Good afternoon and welcome to Al Jazeera YouTube Live with me, Hasan Patel. Now, each day we get together and discuss some of the key political issues of the day. However, today we're actually looking ahead. On Saturday, the African Cup of Nations is taking place in Gabon, kicking off between Gabon and Guinea-Bissau. It's one of 16 teams taking part in the African Cup of Nations, and hopefully by the 5th of February there'll be a new African champion. Now, to discuss more of the Africa Cup of Nations and to highlight some of the strong teams, the key players and the key issues, I have Loauy Mahmoud, Al Jazeera's Arabic sports presenter, and Azad Essa of Al Jazeera English. And between the three of us, we'll try and find out who the favourites will be, but also what's startlingly important for the Africa Cup of Nations. Now, Loauy, first and foremost, what can we expect from this particular tournament?
Well, Hasan, we cannot expect an extravaganza championship and not a failure. We can expect something in between. I've been in Gabon 4 years ago when they co-hosted the championship with Equatorial Guinea. They had three major issues. Accommodation. It's very difficult to find a place to stay in for the visitors, for the journalists, for the TV crews. All rooms were fully booked for the players, something which would be a major issue. At that time, they co-hosted with Equatorial Guinea, so they had only two cities, two stadiums to play in. Now they have all the 16 teams in one country. This would be a major issue. They have also the issue of accommodation, of transportation. They don't have public transportation. It's hard to find a taxi. Even if you find a taxi to get you into the stadium, you have to walk for 2 or 3 kilometers back to find something to pick you up.
So basically, before the football even begins, you're talking about structural problems. Now, Azad, Gabon came in at the last minute to host this particular tournament, mainly because Libya had to pull out due to political instability. Now, in your opinion, how easy is it to have a football tournament like this to take place in an African country like Gabon?
Well, look, this situation regarding countries taking over the tournament at the last second, this is not the first time. So in 2013, Libya was supposed to hold the tournament, and it went to South Africa because of the political unrest in Libya. Incidentally, this tournament was supposed to be held in Libya again, 2017, this time round, but they pulled out because of, again, the political unrest. But people would perhaps should remember that the last tournament, which was supposed to be held in Morocco, moved across to Equatorial Guinea because of the Ebola issue. So, I mean, this is the nature of the world we're living in right now. Of course, these kind of issues are going to be the teething issues regarding accommodation and transportation and stuff like that. But the tournaments coming to these countries, I think, is the most important thing.
And let's talk about the tournament. Let's talk about which teams do you think may progress, who the surprise packages will be, and who may fail. Now, from what I know, Group A, the host Gabon, kick off with Guinea-Bissau on Saturday, but also Cameroon, a fallen giant of African football, some would say, are in there with Burkina Faso. So from these four teams, who do you think will progress?
I would put Gabon and Cameroon. Gabon would be enhanced by Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, one of the best African. Yes, one of the best African players ever. The supporters, the push for the supporters, they need to do something in this championship. In the last championship, when Equatorial Guinea hosted the championship, they managed to qualify to the semi-final. Now Gabon feeds, okay, let's do it. We can do it. Cameroon. Cameroon is always one of the favorites, but in this tournament, maybe they are less favorite because they have money issues. Players are arguing about what are we going to take, what we are not going to take. Some of the players refused to join the national team. They prefer to stay with the European clubs. 8 of them said, no, we're not going to our country. We're playing with the European teams. This would affect the chances of Cameroon in this championship. Here we have Guinea-Bissau. They made huge surprises in the qualification, even in the World Cup qualifications. So we can expect them that they might be joining Gabon from this group.
Now, you mentioned something about Cameroon and some of their players not coming. Didn't that take place before once with Cameroon in a tournament?
It happens all the time with Cameroon and many other countries. like a few days ago, it happened also with Zimbabwe. Some of the players striked. They wanted more money. The local federation said, no, we're not going to give you the money. So there was a kind of moderation between both of them so that they can join the tournament and get less money.
Azad, why do you think this happens? I mean, again, we're moving away from the game of football, but these are teething issues which affect teams.
These are recurring issues. Yes. I believe the first game in this tournament is going to be Gabon versus Guinea-Bissau. Yes. And we know that the players from Guinea-Bissau were striking regarding not being paid over making it into the tournament. But they're not the only ones. Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwean players are battling over daily stipends at the moment. Yeah. These are very, very silly things that continue to take place. I don't know, wouldn't want to say that it's the characteristic of African football, but it certainly seems to be the thing that keeps footballers very insecure on the continent. They think that they, as we know, they're always looking out, looking at Europe, looking even now to China. Until and unless kind of these countries are able to have more tournaments, more infrastructure in place, and better associations, I think these kind of issues are still going to continue.
And hopefully later on in the program we'll be discussing some of these key issues. But you're watching Al Jazeera YouTube Q&A with me, Hasan Patel, talking about the Africa Cup of Nations with Loauy Mahmoud of Al Jazeera Arabic and Azad Essa of Al Jazeera English. So Group A, you believe Gabon and Guinea-Bissau, or Gabon and Cameroon?
Gabon will get the first ticket. The second ticket will be between Guinea-Bissau and Cameroon, if Cameroon wants to qualify to the second round from this championship.
Okay. Now moving on to Group B, which I find personally very interesting. You've got some pretty big teams here. You've got Algeria, Tunisia, Senegal, and Zimbabwe. Now, of course, Algeria, they have Riyad Mahrez.
Yeah, the best African player.
African Player of the Year, English Premier League Player of the Year, Premier League Champions winner with Leicester City playing for them. But also Islam Slimani as well. So two strong players for Algeria. Do you find them to be the favourites for Group B?
I can say that Algeria would get a ticket from this group to qualify, maybe first or second, depending upon the results. Don't forget that they are going to clash with Tunisia, the neighbor. It's an archival
it's a big game?
Yes. So they are clashing together to get one ticket. They have Senegal. Senegal is something to fear. Senegal is always one of the favorites, even though they don't have good players as they used to have in the old days.
Yeah, at the moment they're a little bit weaker than usual, right?
But they have Liverpool's
Sadio Mane. Sadio Mane. But one player cannot drive the whole team to win a championship.
And what about Tunisia and Zimbabwe? Are they just making up the numbers?
Tunisia, they have Henri Kasperjak, who is returning back to take the coaching for the second time. He got the experience in Africa. He got the confidence because he managed to succeed with Tunisia before. This might be one of the factors that will lead Tunisia to the second round for this tournament, unless Senegal make a surprise here.
So again, I'm going to put you on the spot, Loauy, as our experts. Who do you think will qualify?
I would say Algeria and Tunisia.
North Africa, in other words?
Yes.
Okay. Moving on from that, is there a big gulf between the North African teams and other parts of Africa in football? I mean,
you can say that the North African teams are more likely to be European teams compared to the other nations in Africa. The North African teams always get coaches from Europe, high coaches from Europe. All the players got the experience plus the talent. In other countries and other teams like South Africa, Ghana, Ivory Coast, you have the experience or the talent. You cannot have both of them, even though you have good coaches.
But you mentioned South Africa and your country, South Africa, there's no presence this year, nor is there Nigeria. People always used to believe Nigeria was the African team. Will they be missed?
Well, they'll be missed by South Africans and missed by Nigerians, and Nigeria is a continent on its own, But I think what these kind of tournaments have done over the past few years, especially with smaller teams coming through, is that they have created a lot of self-belief among the smaller countries, not only for hosting the tournament, but also doing well in the tournament. So it's not a big deal that Nigeria hasn't come through or South Africa hasn't come through. They will come around again, but to get the smaller teams through, I think that's always been the difficulty.
You mentioned something, Loauy, and I think both of us had this conversation earlier on as well, Azad, that it's slightly sad to see these African teams being coached by Europeans. I mean, I think Uganda has a Scottish coach. French coaches are all over the place. Algeria is under
Belgian George Lekins.
Exactly. Isn't that detrimental for African football? I think I read somewhere that only 2 or 3 teams this year actually have an African coach.
We have to mention here that one of the most successful moments in the African history of football, that Egypt won 3 consecutive titles under a local coach, not a foreign coach, not a European coach. Cameroon and Nigeria did the same. Some of the European coaches have the experience, have new things to offer to the African football, but still they don't understand the African mentality. You have to have a local coach helping the foreign coach so that he can understand what players are thinking of, the way to push them forward. The European football is totally different than the African football, though most of the African players are playing abroad in Europe.
But Azad, isn't that an extension of this whole colonial legacy, that the European can do better than our people?
I mean, if you look at the structure of the African Union and the idea of trying to build a common currency, the African football tournament as well, and Champions League, the African nations and the organizations are trying to copy European standards all the time. So that's like not a new thing, right?
Okay.
So there's this crazy kind of mimicry. It is a colonial hangover, if you can call it that. It is jarring to see a European coach a lot of the time, especially because people are seen as fly-by-nights. They come in, they just do a couple of training sessions and maybe go through a tournament, and if they lose, there's no kind of accountability. So there's this disappointment. But I don't know how we break through that, because there's this perception that as more African players go into European clubs, etc., then we need a European coach to guide them when they come back, basically. Otherwise, they'll be too big when they arrive back into the national level. Almost, it's like this. The club, as you said earlier, sometimes clubs take more precedence than national teams. So I don't know how you bridge that. Yeah.
Because sometimes they say that the African players, by nature, got the mentality of a good player, but they don't have somebody who can control this mentality and form a teamwork, a group that can succeed together. It's not a personal or individual effort.
But then why has Egypt constantly had an Egyptian coach? Is it because they've got the expertise?
They have tried the foreign coach, the European coach, the American coach, and they failed. They tried the local coach, and they succeeded many times. Even in the both times, only when Egypt qualified for the World Cup, it was a local coach.
Interesting. It's very much. This idea that an African player needs to be tamed in a particular way is completely ridiculous, right? And there's a complete misunderstanding, and a complete there's a misperception that, as you said earlier, that everyone needs to play and live and eat and do everything the same. African football is different, and they've got to rear it in their own particular style.
And part of it is the post-colonial era.
Yes.
The Anglophone and Francophone in Africa, when you are speaking in your French-speaking country, you would prefer to get a coach from France. If you are an Anglophone, you'll get a coach from Britain or Scotland or whatever.
That's what I found funny, because Uganda, is a Scottish coach. I don't know how.
Asking of Scotland.
I don't know if he's still there now, but it was an interesting thing. Now, lads, going on to Group C.
Yes.
Ivory Coast, DR Congo, Morocco and Togo. I tell you who I'm really looking forward to seeing playing there. Wilfred Zaha for Ivory Coast. Now, reason being is that Wilfred Zaha was born in the UK. He had a chance to play for England, but he left that to play for Ivory Coast. And Ivory Coast is the team of champions, as people always call them. So I presume they should be the favourites.
They are. They are defending their title. And Ivory Coast always got the history of players refusing to play in the European countries and preferring Ivory Coast. You remember Didier Drogba, when he spent his money on the team and on the country. When the time of the civil war came in Ivory Coast, he was the one who reunited the team. He said, okay, Muslims, Christians, whatever you worship, we are all one team. We need to succeed. This is for the country, not for ourselves. So Ivory Coast is always one of the favorite teams to win the title in the African Championship. I can put with them Morocco because they are led by the French Hervé Renard, who got the championship with Zambia and Ivory Coast in 2 consecutive times.
So he has the experience in the words of the championship. Yeah. But Togo, one-man team.
They have Claude Leroy, the coach, who got the experience. He's well known in Africa. He knows everybody in Africa, but they have only one player, Emmanuel Adebayor, and one player cannot drive the whole team to win a championship. He needs a team, and Togo doesn't have that team.
Well, it's funny because Adebayor apparently has scored 30 goals for his country. That's actually more than the other 22 players of the team. Yeah. Oh, sorry, the squad. So it shows how much they rely on Adebayor. So your predictions for Group C?
I would put Ivory Coast for the first ticket and Morocco for the second.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions, and we'll continue some of this. These African players who are playing in the Africa Cup of Nations, just from England, from the Premier League, 24 players, which is a record number this year, from 13 Premier League clubs. Of course, many from France, Belgium, Germany. They come back to Africa, they're playing in this tournament. How important is it for African football that these African superstars are doing well in Europe, but coming back home? How important is it?
They are coming back home for the nation, for the pride, for the family. The clubs would be the money, the future, the stability. But for the family, for the African player, it's more important than the money. That's why many players playing in Europe, they prefer to come back and play with the nations, like Alfred Zaha. Not the case like Cameroon and other countries where players prefer to stay with the clubs instead of going back to the nation. We have this issue occurring every time when the African Championship is held. It's the European team saying, okay, we need to keep our players. We spent a lot of money for these players. We need them to stay with us. But the African Federation says, okay, it's time, it's the laws, it's the regulations. We need them back to play with their countries, to represent their countries. They will gain the experience, and then they will go back to help you.
Now, Azad, what does this mean for a young African child who wants to become a footballer? Does it show confidence in him aspiring to become someone like, for example, Bailey of Manchester United or Zaha and play for a European club, or would he want to play for a club somewhere locally?
Yeah. Well, that's the million-dollar question. I think there are many layers to this. So on one hand, you have big clubs in South Africa. You have big clubs in Egypt, right? You're not going to earn the same amount of money if you're in Europe. But there are, not everyone is aspiring to just go to Europe. People want to play, and there are thousands of players playing in local clubs. But when you see these big African players returning, what it does for the ambition and aspiration and the kind of self-respect for young people growing up, it gives them a lot of hope and a lot of it feels like they can also achieve their dreams. I think that the world has become a huge marketplace for all types of players, right? And these players coming back, it gives them a lot of opportunities to move in any direction. So I don't think it's like a bad thing for people to be playing in Europe. I think it's great for them to.
But what about African football, to build up African football? We have a situation where the coaches are foreign for national teams. Some of the best players are playing in the world's best leagues, or playing, for example, in Qatar or the UAE for that matter. Doesn't it surely doesn't help the infrastructure for the future?
Yeah, about the infrastructure here, let's remember one thing. Gabon was hosting this championship. Didn't finish the stadium that was supposed to host the opening game. Even in 2012, the place where the opening match was supposed to be played was called Omnisport. It was an old stadium. They demolished it, they rebuilt it, but they didn't finish in time. That's why they switched it to another place called Stade d'Amitié in the capital of Libreville. It was built by the Chinese in coronation for the cooperation between China and Gabon. Now this stadium, Omnisport, it's not finished till now yet. That's why they are going back to play in Stade d'Amitié. So we don't have infrastructure in stadiums. We don't have good quality of helping things like hospitals, like ambulances, emergencies, next to the stadiums, something that wouldn't help developing the African football.
But then, with players not playing in Africa, that means it's just a circle, a vicious circle, going round and round and round.
It depends on the generation.
Yeah.
So, if we talk about players, maybe 20 years ago, there were 1 or 2 players in the Premier League, right?
Yeah.
Now we have what you said, 25 or
24 in the Premier
24,
League,
right? And then you have, I mean, most of the the Guinea-Bissau team are playing in Portugal.
Yes.
So it really depends on this generation of footballers today. I mean, if they come back with all this expertise, with all this money, with all this, with all this experience, and they are able to get into the system of the local associations and rebuild these things, then it can change. I mean, it takes a long time to change the system. We're talking about, you're speaking about Gabon with its lack of emergency services and hospital or mobile clinics. We're talking about a country that's really poor also. You know, 1/3 is below the poverty line. It's a country totally dependent on oil. Most of its exports going to China, right? There's a lot of corruption, whether we like it or not. That's the issue. It's a country governed by one family for the last 50 years or so. There's a lot of problems there, and football is, you know, and the way football is managed is just a manifestation of that entire problem.
Yeah.
You got to sort out a lot of things and then get to the football.
And here we have also to mention that one player cannot do the difference.
Of course.
For Togo, it's Adebayor only.
Yeah.
For Ivory Coast, it was Didier Drogba. For Cameroon, it was Samuel Eto'o. So you
Yes.
have to have a team.
And George
when-
Weah for Liberia in the
for
90s.
Liberia.
Yes.
So the whole team must go back to the country and build everything anew
So-
and help the younger
So you would say
generations.
that this tournament actually kind of empowers countries to be united for that short period, make them feel good, and hopefully something good can come out of that.
Well, it's like an short-term drug.
Short-term
opium.
drug.
I mean, the Gabon will experience a little bit of tourism. The hotels will be full. The few hotels that are there in the capital, for example, and the service industry would benefit. But then you go back to normal.
Now going back to the football, of course, which well, it's interesting having this discussion because people can say that it's not an African problem because in Brazil, stadiums weren't ready in time for the World Cup or the Olympics for that matter. There were teething problems in London. And people may say how much they want to say about the 2012 Olympics, but there were problems initially and then things clicked in. So sometimes there may be a lot of negativity, shall I say, towards certain sporting tournaments in Africa, but it can happen anywhere. I mean, in India, during the Commonwealth Games in 2010, they found dogs somehow staying in a room somewhere.
In the Commonwealth complex.
In Commonwealth complex, and there were a lot of, probably one of the worst sporting events according
But
to some
corruption
people.
makes it worse in Africa.
Of course, and that's in itself a long subject that we can probably talk a lot about. Now, Group D, Ghana, Mali, Egypt, and Uganda. Egypt
I
and
would
Ghana.
start for Egypt.
Of course, so
it's my team.
it's your team,
Yes.
so no one else will beat
No,
Egypt.
they will have a chance in this championship. They have a new generation under a new coach. They got the mentality to win. They say, Hector Cooper, the Argentinian coach, says, don't judge me by how I play, judge me by results.
Yes.
He is 100% now. He's doing all what he wants. He's winning, and that's more important for a team that was away from this championship for 3 consecutive tournaments.
Okay.
Now they're coming back under the Mohamed Salah and Mohamed Nini.
Players for Arsenal, Nini and Salah,
Yes, and
players
Roma.
for Roma.
So it's a chance for this team to progress, to develop, to get a new generation, to qualify for the World Cup. They consider this tournament as a good preparation for the African qualifications for the World Cup also.
And of course also the pressure of 85 million Egyptians might also play a part.
Yes,
expect.
Yes. We need another title. Egypt got the title for 7 times now, and they need another title. They need to break their record.
But their rival is in this group, Ghana.
It's Ghana.
Some top players for Ghana as well. Asio and
But
Essa.
yeah, but don't forget that Egypt won Ghana last month in the African qualification for the World Cup. So it's a chance for Egypt to retake on Ghana again, and also to put pressure on Ghana before playing Ghana in the last game of the African qualifications for the World Cup.
Also they're in the same group for
Yes.
the World Cup as well.
They are with Uganda.
So
It's like putting the African qualifications for the World Cup in the African Championship.
and please don't get upset, Loauy, with this question, but what would happen if Egypt does lose? Say if they don't qualify. Say sometimes it happens, like Spain, for example, they didn't qualify out of the groups in Brazil. What would happen?
As an Egyptian, I would say that people would care much about the World Cup than the African Cup of Nations. We need to qualify for the World Cup. We have been away from this championship, the World Cup, for many, many years. The last time it was in Italy, 1990. Now we need to go back to this.
I remember that game very well. They played England.
Yeah.
Hasan played
Hasan,
for.
yeah.
Yes, I remember.
And Hasan got the record for the most
goals.
Most
goals.
goals, and even the most player who played in the African Cup of Nations. By the
Most
way,
games.
yes, Sam Al-Hadri, who is the goalkeeper of Egypt, might break this record if he plays only for 5 minutes in this tournament.
In terms of age.
Because Hussam Hassan was 39, Sam Al-Hadri is 43.
43.
Imagine a goalkeeper who is 43 years old and he's playing in this tournament. Here we have Uganda. Uganda made huge surprises in the African qualifications for the World Cup against Ghana. That's why we have to fear from Uganda. Uganda might be one of the surprises of this tournament and they can snatch a ticket to the second round. Mali, as usual, is one of the favorites to qualify, but as usual, they do not.
Okay, so some interesting perceptions there by Azad and Loauy. If you had to choose one country, in terms of the leading up to qualifying, the preparation, and the players and the mental agility, who would you put your
I can put Ivory Coast and Ghana.
Ivory Coast and Ghana.
Yeah.
And Azad?
You know, I'm going to be totally contrarian here, and I'm going to say that, you know, I also think Ivory Coast is going to be like at least semi-finalists in this case. But I would like to see like two really unknown teams in the final. Someone like DR Congo and Gabon, you know, one of the smaller teams. Like I think we need that kind of shift also. Egypt and Ghana and Ivory Coast have had their fun now. I think we need some.
But Egypt needs this title.
Egypt needs this title. Between Ghana and Egypt, they've won it 11 times.
Yes.
So I see what you mean.
Can you imagine DR Congo, you know, DRC winning it. You know, a country that's having so many issues, and football is again something that brings people.
It depends
together.
upon whom are you going to play. They are
Of course,
facing Ivory Coast and Morocco in the group
it's a
stage,
huge,
and then
huge
if they qualify, they will face Egypt or Ghana or Mali or Uganda, something which make it more difficult for them to qualify.
absolutely.
I think Algeria. That's my personal opinion.
If they retrieve their spirit of the World Cup, they might do it. Remember, after the World Cup, many of the players retired. They got a new coach, and then they sacked the coach and got another coach, and they are little bit tumbling in the few months. So it needs more effort to build a team. But Algerians are known to play well if they are put under pressure. If you put the Algerian team under pressure, then expect good results.
Some interesting points there. Now, CAF, the African Federation, of course, organise the tournament, and they've gone through their fair share of controversy. But the tournament has changed over many years. I remember as a young child watching the 1992 tournament, and at that time I think it was only George Weah and Abide Pele were the players I remembered because they played in Europe, but the rest of the teams, the rest of the players were unknown entities. Now, how important is this Africa Cup of Nations for CAF, for the African Federation?
This tournament is coming in a time just after a few days of the new decision by the FIFA to increase the number of participants in the World Cup 2026, something which would put more effort on the Africans to prove that they deserve to get more seats.
But currently there's 5 or 6?
It's 5 now,
5.
But now they're speaking about 9 tickets for the African participants, something that would put pressure on the Africans. We have to prove that we deserve more tickets. We are good, we are qualified to get it compared to Asia, South America, even Europe, because Europe got more numbers than Africa, though Africa got more members in the FIFA.
And also, I mean, going to FIFA itself, they lost an ally, the African Federation in Sepp Blatter. He's no longer the chairman of FIFA. So how important is it now for African nations to remain united, because their friend, their ally that supported them is no longer there?
They still have Essa, who is one of the big names in the FIFA.
And he's president of CAF.
Yes, yes. And he's been in this position for a long time. He's still going to stay in it for quite a few years. And he got good relations with Gianni Infantino, and he pushed the Africans to vote for Gianni Infantino in the FIFA
current president of
yes,
FIFA.
Yes, in the elections.
But also, just to kind of talk about a couple of other points, African continents only had the World Cup once in South Africa in 2010. You were there, as you were writing and reporting on it at that time. Can you see the African continent hosting major tournaments in the future? Or do you think it will only be these small tournaments like taking place in Gabon or Burkina Faso or Mali?
I mean, sure, why not? I mean, Morocco can hold the tournament, right? I think we can also perhaps move past these kind of things where maybe one country hosts a tournament or a continent hosts a tournament. For example, why not Morocco and Spain?
Oh, imagine that.
Sharing a tournament. What's the big deal?
Of course, of course.
No, I think we're well on our way to major tournaments coming in. But it doesn't mean that major tournaments coming in is necessarily a great thing for the country. South Africa has a litany of white elephant stadiums all over the place. Guest houses and hotels are not being used in far-flung parts of the country. So, you know, we don't need to necessarily rush out there and start getting big tournaments to come in when they don't necessarily bring in all the loot that you want.
First, you have to have the infrastructure, and then you have the planning for the future, what you are going to do with all the stadiums, all the hotels after the tournaments.
Yeah.
Of course, and that again is a constant discussion and debate that takes place after each tournament, regardless of where it takes place. So you believe Ivory Coast and Ghana
are the two most favorites to win the title?
DR Congo?
I'm going to go DRC because I like their kit. That's
okay.
One. I mean, that's okay. And two, they came out third the last one, right? In the last tournament.
Yeah,
they came out third. I'll go with something completely.
I think Algeria, because I got to see Riyad Mahrez drive past me once in Leicester.
In this case, I have to put Egypt also. Mohamed Salah needs to hold the title.
So next few weeks, no doubt, Loauy, you'll be busy for Al Jazeera Arabic reporting on the tournament, on the Africa Cup of Nations, and no doubt we'll be seeing you on our screens. And Azad, no doubt you'll be working on the website to ensure that we know what the results will be. And hopefully, who knows, we can discuss after the tournament how the tournament went.
Maybe.
Thank you for watching Al Jazeera YouTube Live with me, Hasan Patel, Al Jazeera Arabic's Loauy Mahmoud, and Al Jazeera's Azad Essa, talking about the Africa Cup of Nations.